Billionaire stunned as young black girl teaches his daughter, then he changes her life forever. The morning started like many others in Ethan Caldwell's life. His driver pulled up to the glass tower, he walked through the quiet lobby, and 3 assistants met him with files and updates. People greeted him with warm smiles and perfect words. Everything was smooth and fast, like a well-made machine. But inside his head, things were not smooth. He kept thinking about his daughter, Lena. She was 12, bright, curious, and funny when she forgot to be shy. Lately, she had lost that easy laugh. Her teachers said she understood ideas but froze in tests. She loved science videos at home, but in class she was scared to raise her hand. Ethan tried the usual answers. He hired tutors. He bought practice books and apps. He asked his assistant to schedule confidence coaching, which sounded important. Still, Lena's shoulders stayed tight when she looked at numbers, and her voice went small in group work. When he asked how school went, she said, "Fine," and ran to her room. He wanted to fix it the way he fixed problems at work, with speed, money, and a plan. But this was not a clear plan. It was a feeling. His daughter was going quiet, and he did not know how to reach her. One day, his assistant handed him a simple flyer. It was for a free after-school robotics club at the public library. The club welcomed kids from different schools. Older students helped younger ones. "It's not fancy," the assistant said. "But it's kind. Maybe kindness is the missing piece." Ethan almost laughed at that. Kindness did not ship products or close deals. Then he looked at the photo on the flyer, 3 kids leaning over a small robot, grinning with pure focus, and he nodded. "Sign her up," he said. On the first Tuesday, the library smelled like paper, pencils, and something warm that felt like time. The meeting room had old tables, tape marks on the floor, and a box of random parts. There were second-hand laptops and tubs full of wheels and wires. Yet the room felt bright. Kids arrived in groups and pairs, some with backpacks that had seen better days, all with eyes that grew wide when they saw the parts. A short whiteboard listed the plan in plain words: build, test, try again, share. That's where Lena met Zuri Owens. Zuri was 13, with a clear voice and gentle eyes. She wore a simple t-shirt under a worn hoodie and had a pencil tucked behind her ear. She moved with the kind of calm that made others calm too. She set out batteries, paper clips, tape, and little DC motors. When a small boy dropped a bag of screws and looked ready to cry, Zuri knelt and helped him gather each piece, counting softly. It took 2 minutes, and the boy's face relaxed. She did not rush him. She did not say "be careful," in a sharp tone. She just helped. The lead librarian introduced the day's activity: make a small fan spin from a battery and motor. The goal was not speed. The goal was to learn how electricity flows, how to connect wires, and how to stay calm when it didn't work the first time. Zuri floated between tables. When kids got stuck, she did not grab the parts from their hands. She asked, "Where does the power start? Where does it go? What do you think is missing?" She drew quick sketches on scrap paper: arrows for flow, dots for connection, little symbols that made big ideas small and friendly. Lena started slowly. Her hands shook when she stripped the wire. "It's okay," Zuri said. "We'll do it together. Tiny steps." She showed how to hold the wire with one hand and the tool with the other, how to twist just enough, how to check with eyes and fingers. She asked Lena to take a breath. "Now try again," she said. A clean bit of copper showed. "See? You did that," Zuri smiled. It was a small win, but it felt big to Lena. Her shoulders dropped a little. Ethan came early to pick up his daughter and stood in the doorway, unnoticed. He had expected noise and mess and a teacher telling everyone what to do. Instead, he saw small groups working like quiet teams. He saw a boy explain to another how to tape the wire so it stayed put. He saw a girl cheer when her fan spun, then lean over to help her neighbor. He saw the librarian watching with pride and stepping in only when needed. Most of all, he saw Zuri with Lena, not pushing, not fixing for her, but guiding. He watched Lena's face in profile. She had that look he loved, eyes steady, lips pressed in a line of focus, a tiny crease on her forehead when she tried something new. When the fan finally spun, Lena's mouth opened in surprise, and she laughed. It was a small laugh, but it rang clear in the room. Ethan swallowed. He had not heard that laugh after school in a long time. When the session ended, kids returned parts and stacked chairs. A few stayed back to ask Zuri questions. She answered each one with care, giving the same focus to the shy boy and the talkative girl. She was patient, but she was not fragile. She expected them to try, to listen, to help one another. She treated them like they were capable because they were. Ethan finally stepped forward. "Thank you for helping my daughter," he said to Zuri. It came out sounding like a formal speech. He could hear himself using his executive voice. Zuri nodded and smiled, then went back to packing motors into a box. He felt oddly awkward. He was used to people stopping when he spoke. Here, the work kept flowing, and he had to find a new rhythm if he wanted to fit in. He turned to the librarian and asked about the club. She told him how it began with a small grant and grew with love and volunteer time. Some weeks had more kids than parts. The older ones, like Zuri, stepped up to teach because they remembered what it felt like to be new and scared. She pointed to a binder on the shelf. "Those are Zuri's notes," she said. "She writes simple steps for kids who feel anxious. It helps them move. It helps them speak." Ethan looked at Zuri again. She was helping a little girl count out paper clips. "2 on this side, 2 on that side," she said. "Balance helps. Electricity likes a clear path." She spoke like a friend, not a judge. The little girl copied her tone and nodded like a small scientist. On the drive home, Lena sat beside her dad with a box in her lap. It held her fan, a few extra wires, and a hand-drawn map that showed a battery, a switch, and a motor. "Zuri says I can try a switch next time," she said. "So I can turn it on and off." She drew me the steps. She held up the map with pride. "She makes hard things small," she added as if that was the secret key. Ethan asked what Zuri was like. "She listens first," Lena said. "Then she explains. If I get stuck, she says, 'Let's try one tiny part.' I did not feel dumb. I felt safe." She looked out the window, then back at him. "Can we go again next week?" "Of course," he said. He meant it. He also felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not about robots. It was about the way someone met his daughter where she was and did not rush her. That night, Ethan walked through his quiet house. The walls were clean, the lights soft, the kitchen perfect. A bowl of fruit sat in a row that a stylist would admire. He sat at the table and looked at Lena's hand-drawn map. The lines were not straight, but the meaning was. She had learned something real. He thought about his day full of numbers and plans, and the hour at the library that felt more alive than all the meetings combined. He opened his laptop and searched for the library branch. The website was plain. There were photos of story time, homework help, and the Robots Club. In one picture, he saw Zuri leaning over a table, pointing at a wire. She looked like a young teacher, steady and kind. He clicked on a small note about the program's needs. It did not ask for shiny things. It asked for batteries, safe storage bins, bus passes for kids who traveled far, and small stipends for teen tutors. He was used to writing big checks for big projects. These small needs felt almost too simple. But maybe simple was the point. Before bed, He stood outside Lena's door. Light spilled from the crack. He knocked. She looked up from her map. "I want to show you," she said. He sat on the floor as she explained each little symbol and why it mattered. He asked questions. She answered without shrinking. When she finished, he told her he was proud. Her eyes shone in a way he missed. He said, "What do you think helped most?" She said, "Zuri told me to breathe and try one tiny step. Also, she did not laugh when I messed up." She waited. After Lena fell asleep, he went to his desk and wrote a note to himself: "Listen before fixing. Ask what they need, not what I think they need." He did not know yet what that would mean in action. He only knew the feeling in the library was rare and real, and he wanted to honor it. For once, he did not jump to solutions. He decided to go back the next time, not as a donor or a CEO, but as a dad who wanted to learn how this room worked. The next afternoon, he told his assistant he would leave the office early once a week. The assistant raised his eyebrows but nodded. "Is this about the library?" he asked. Ethan said yes. The assistant smiled in a way that said he already knew this was important. "I'll rearrange the board prep," he said. "Go." Ethan did not sleep right away that night. He lay in the dark and thought about the quiet power in that room. Not money power. Not title power. The power of a calm voice, patient hands, and a mind that breaks big problems into small steps. He wondered how many kids had walked into that room with fear and walked out with a little courage. He wondered who had taught Zuri to teach like that. He wondered what would happen if more rooms felt like that at school, at work, even in his home. In the morning, the world moved fast again. Emails, calls, decisions. But a part of him stayed in that library room, where a motor spun and a girl smiled. He carried that picture into his day like a small light in his pocket. When people asked what was new, he almost said a fan, and then laughed at himself. Yet it was true. Something small had started to turn, and he could feel it. He did not know it yet, but that small turning would change more than a week's schedule. It would change how he saw his daughter, and it would change how he saw the right way to help. The following evening at the library felt different for Ethan. He no longer came just as a father picking up his daughter. He came as a quiet observer, curious about the room, the energy, and the girl who seemed to light it up without even trying. The tables were arranged with parts again, but today the challenge was harder, making a tiny car roll forward using rubber bands and wheels. The kids looked both excited and nervous. Zuri stood at the front, not taller than most of the kids, but she had a presence. She clapped her hands lightly and said, "We're going to build together. Don't worry if it doesn't work right away. That's the point, we'll learn what to fix." The children nodded. Ethan noticed that her words were simple but strong. She wasn't lecturing. She was inviting. Lena sat at a table with two other girls. At first, her hands stayed folded, and she looked at the pile of parts like it was a puzzle too big to solve. Then Zuri walked over. She bent down to Lena's level and asked, "What do you see here? Wheels? Rubber band? Frame? Which part looks friendly?" Lena smiled shyly and said, "The wheels." Zuri laughed softly. "Perfect. Then let's start with the wheels. The rest can wait." Suddenly the problem didn't feel so big anymore. Ethan listened from the side of the room. He was used to expensive tutors who spoke fast, full of terms and drills. They had always made Lena feel more nervous. But here, with just a calm question, Zuri opened a door. When the session ended, Ethan approached Zuri again. "You're really good at this," he said. "Have you thought about teaching when you're older?" She shrugged and said, "I'd love to be an engineer and also teach. Kids like me don't always get teachers who explain things slowly. I want to change that." She said it as if it were an ordinary dream, not realizing how extraordinary it sounded. The librarian joined in, adding, "Zuri has been here for years. She started out scared, like Lena. Now she's our best peer tutor. She even writes her own little guides." She pointed to a worn binder on the shelf. Ethan walked over and opened it. Inside were pages of hand-drawn notes, diagrams of circuits, lists of tiny steps, reminders like breathe before trying again or mistakes mean progress. The handwriting was neat but full of life. Later in the car, Lena couldn't stop talking. "Dad, I get it now. Zuri showed me how the rubber band stores energy like a spring. When you let it go, it pushes the wheels. It's like magic, but not really, it's just energy moving." She held her small car on her lap, proud even though it wobbled more than it rolled. Ethan smiled but stayed quiet. His daughter wasn't just learning science, she was glowing with belief in herself. That was something no tutor had managed to give her. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Zuri. She was only 13, yet she carried herself with a kind of wisdom and patience that reminded him of the best leaders he had met in business. She had no boardroom, no big office, no polished suit. Just a library room, a pencil behind her ear, and a heart that refused to give up on kids. He asked himself questions he wasn't used to asking: how many other Zuris were out there, unseen? How many dreams never got a chance because the world didn't notice them? He thought about the library's request list: bus passes, batteries, small stipends. Tiny things compared to the giant budgets he handled every day. Before turning off the light, Ethan whispered to himself, "Maybe it's not about what I can give. Maybe it's about how I can listen." He decided that next time, he would not just watch. He would stay, learn, and find out what this room really needed, not from his own assumptions, but from the people who lived it every day. The following week, the library buzzed with even more energy. A big event was coming, the county STEM fair, and the small robotics club was preparing to show what they could build. For the younger kids, it was about displaying basic machines. For the older group, the goal was bigger: a small robot that could follow a line drawn on the floor. Ethan sat in the back of the room, quietly observing. He had shifted his schedule again, something his assistants were still adjusting to. But for him, it was becoming the most important meeting of the week. He was no longer just watching Lena, he was watching the entire process. On the tables lay tangled wires, chipped wheels, laptops that hummed and froze, and cardboard frames taped together. The kids' faces showed excitement mixed with nerves. The STEM fair was only 2 weeks away, and things were not running smoothly. The first problem appeared quickly. A laptop refused to turn on. Without it, the kids couldn't test their robot's code. "We'll share mine," Zuri said, though her own laptop had missing keys and a cracked etch. She typed slowly, guiding the others through the coding steps. Then came the second challenge. The robot wouldn't move as expected. It spun in circles, refusing to follow the black line taped on the floor. Some kids groaned in frustration. Others wanted to give up. Ethan noticed Lena's hands trembling as she whispered, "What if it doesn't work at the fair?" Zuri knelt beside her. "Do you remember when your fan didn't spin at first?" Lena nodded. "What did we do?" "Tiny steps," Lena replied softly. "Exactly," Zuri smiled. "This is the same. We'll test one piece at a time. The wheels, the code, the sensors. We'll breathe, and we'll try again." The kids calmed down. Slowly, they broke the problem into parts. Some adjusted the wheels. Others checked the wiring. One typed out test code while another drew diagrams. The robot still didn't follow the line perfectly, but it moved straighter than before. Meanwhile, some parents who had come to watch began whispering. "Why is a teenager leading so much?" one asked. Another frowned at the taped cardboard and mismatched parts. "This looks messy." Ethan overheard but stayed quiet. He noticed how Zuri's calm presence kept the group from falling apart, even when adults doubted her. Over the next few days, challenges piled higher. A delivery of spare motors was delayed. Batteries died mid-practice. On Friday, a sudden storm knocked out the library's power. The room went dark. Groans filled the air. But Zuri clapped her hands and said, "Let's use flashlights. We can still learn." She had the kids draw diagrams of circuits on paper and explain them to each other. Some even acted out how energy moved by walking in a line around the room. The storm could not stop them. Ethan felt a quiet awe. This girl had no fancy resources, yet she turned problems into lessons. At home, Lena's confidence wavered. "Dad, maybe I shouldn't go to the fair. What if I freeze?" she asked one night. Ethan sat beside her. "I saw you explain energy like a teacher, Lena. You didn't freeze then." She looked down. "That was because Zuri was there." Ethan thought carefully. "Maybe that's the point. We're stronger when we have people who believe in us. You have Zuri and you have me." Lena's eyes softened. She nodded slowly. Ethan's own thoughts grew restless. He considered offering to buy the program brand new equipment, shiny laptops, polished kits. That was how he usually solved problems with scale and speed. But when he suggested it to the librarian, she smiled gently. "Donations help, but listening helps more," she said. "Ask the kids and the teen tutors what they truly need." That answer stayed with him. The final practice before the fair arrived. The robot still glitched, veering left when it should go straight. Tension filled the room. Ethan leaned forward, ready to step in, ready to offer big solutions. But then he saw Zuri gather the kids. "Remember," she said, "the fair isn't about a perfect robot. It's about showing how we solve problems. We'll tell our story, not just show our machine." Her words shifted the mood. The kids straightened. Lena looked at her dad with a nervous but determined smile. Ethan's chest tightened. He realized something: he had spent years chasing perfection, but here was a group of children learning the beauty of persistence, teamwork, and small wins. That night, after Lena went to bed, Ethan sat at his desk. The binder of Zuri's notes rested beside him. He flipped through it again. Simple words, hand-drawn sketches, reminders to breathe, to take tiny steps. This was wisdom most adults never learned. He looked out his window at the city lights. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about markets or profits. He was thinking about a 13-year-old girl with a pencil behind her ear, leading a room through storm and struggle with nothing but patience and belief. He knew then that the fair was only the beginning. Something bigger was waiting, something that could change not just Lena's life, but Zuri's too. The county STEM fair arrived with a buzz of energy. The school gym was filled with tables, posters, robots, models, and bright-eyed students ready to show their work. Parents leaned over displays, judges carried clipboards, and curious visitors walked around asking questions. The air smelled of paper, markers, and nervous excitement. Ethan stood at the back with his hands in his pockets, trying not to look like a billionaire who didn't belong there. He wasn't here as an executive. He was here as Lena's father, watching her step into something bigger than herself. Lena clutched her notebook tightly as she stood with her group near their robot. The small machine, patched with tape and cardboard, waited on the table. It looked nothing like the sleek kits from wealthier schools nearby. Their neighbors had shiny 3D printed designs, polished displays, and banners with logos. Compared to them, the library team seemed simple, almost fragile. Then came the big test. A judge stopped at their table and asked for a demonstration. Zuri, calm as always, smiled and nodded. The kids placed the robot on the black taped line. The crowd leaned in. The robot twitched forward, then spun in a crooked circle. It veered off the line, the wheels squeaking against the floor. A ripple of laughter came from nearby. Ethan's chest tightened. He saw Lena's face pale. She looked like she wanted to disappear. But before the panic grew, Zuri raised her voice gently. "Let's pause," she said, kneeling by the robot. Then she stood and faced the judge with steady eyes. "Our robot didn't work perfectly. But what we want to share is our process." She quickly divided the kids into roles. One explained how they designed the frame with recycled cardboard. Another showed the wiring with hand-drawn diagrams. Lena's turn came. Her hands shook, but Zuri gave her a nod. Lena began, her voice small. Then she remembered Zuri's advice, one tiny step. She breathed. "I worked on the wheels," she said more clearly. "At first, they kept falling off. I wanted to quit. But we learned to test one piece at a time. We added tape for balance. It wasn't perfect, but it rolled straighter each time." Her words grew steadier. The judge listened, nodding. Ethan blinked in surprise. This was the same girl who used to freeze at school. Now she was standing tall, explaining failure as learning. The crowd shifted. Some parents who had doubted earlier leaned in with interest. The laughter quieted. The judges scribbled notes. What they saw was not a broken robot, it was teamwork, resilience, and growth. After the presentation, the kids stepped aside, nervous but proud. Ethan felt something deep in his chest. He realized he had spent years chasing flawless outcomes, yet here, a failure turned into the most powerful lesson of all. Later, when the fair ended, awards were announced. The library team did not win first place for design or performance. But they received a special award for collaboration and problem solving. The children cheered. Zuri smiled, holding the ribbon high, but then handed it to Lena. "You spoke from your heart," she said. "This is yours." That night, Ethan could not stop thinking about Zuri. He asked if he could meet her family. Hesitant but polite, Zuri invited him the following weekend. When Ethan visited her small apartment, he was humbled. The living room was neat but modest, filled with school books, folded laundry, and the smell of soup simmering on the stove. Zuri's mother, a tired but kind woman in a nurse's uniform, welcomed him warmly. She explained how Zuri often stayed up late studying after helping around the house. "She has a gift," her mother said softly. "But we can only do so much." On a small desk by the window sat Zuri's binder of notes. Ethan flipped through it again. Each page was a roadmap of patience and hope. It wasn't just about circuits. It was about courage, about breaking fear into steps anyone could climb. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He knew this was more than a small story. This was a seed that could grow if someone cared enough to nurture it. Before leaving, he asked Zuri, her mom, the librarian, and even some of the kids what they truly needed, not guesses, not assumptions. The answers surprised him. They didn't ask for brand new gadgets or luxury supplies. They asked for simple things: bus passes so kids could attend regularly, safe storage for equipment, small stipends for teen tutors like Zuri, and a space to keep growing after school. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the city lights. His whole career had been about making big moves, big investments, big results. But now he understood that real change often started small: listening, trusting, building step by step. He made a decision. Not just to donate, but to commit. To partner. To let the community lead. Together with the librarian and Zuri, he began shaping a plan, a scholarship fund for Zuri and other peer tutors. Paid teen tutor fellowships so teaching wasn't just volunteer work but recognized effort. A community makers lab inside the library, built with input from the kids themselves. As he closed his notebook, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years: not the rush of a business deal, but the quiet certainty that he was about to change lives, starting with one girl who had already changed. 1 year later, the library looked completely different. Where there had once been old tables and second-hand laptops, there was now a bright new corner called the Maker's Lab. The walls were painted with cheerful colors, shelves held labeled boxes of parts, and safe storage bins kept everything in place. On the tables sat small toolkits, batteries, wires, and simple machines ready to be explored. The room was still modest compared to high-tech schools, but it was alive with laughter, curiosity, and confidence. Ethan stood quietly in the back, just as he had the first time he ever walked in. But this time he didn't feel like an outsider. The librarians greeted him warmly, not as the billionaire donor, but as a partner. Parents nodded at him with gratitude. Kids rushed past him, barely noticing him, too excited to begin building their projects. He smiled. That was exactly how he wanted it. At the center of the room was Zuri. She was now in an early college program, juggling advanced studies with her role as the lead peer tutor. She wore the same calm expression, the same pencil behind her ear, but there was something new to confidence. She was training other teens to become tutors, showing them the methods she had created in her binder. That binder had grown into a small handbook now, copied and shared among libraries in other neighborhoods. Step 1, breathe. Step 2, break the problem small. Step 3, try again. Her words had become the quiet rhythm of the lab. Lena was different too. She no longer hid behind her notebook. She stood beside Zuri, helping a younger child connect wires. Her shoulders were relaxed, her voice clear. See? The power goes from here to here. If it doesn't work, don't worry. We'll fix it together. Ethan's chest filled with pride. His daughter wasn't just learning, she was giving back. The scholarship fund had already supported Zuri and 2 other teen tutors. It paid for their exam fees, bus passes, and even small stipends for their teaching time. No longer did Zuri have to choose between helping others and finishing her own homework. She had time, and with that time, her dream grew sharper. I want to be an engineer and an educator, she told Ethan one afternoon. I want to design systems that help kids like me feel seen. The library now tracked outcomes with simple charts. Attendance was higher. More girls joined each month. Kids spoke more confidently in school. Teachers noticed the difference. Parents said their children talked about tiny steps at home, using the same method for chores, cooking, even calming down during arguments. Ethan himself had changed in ways he hadn't expected. At his company, philanthropy shifted from big public projects to small, community-led grants. Instead of writing checks for flashy events, he started listening to what people truly needed. He told his board, sometimes the most powerful investment is in patience, not speed. At first, they were surprised. But when results showed deeper impact, they understood. One local newspaper covered the story of the new Maker's Lab. The article wasn't about Ethan. His name was mentioned only once at the very end. The headline read, Teen Tutor Turns Library into Learning Hub. Zuri's photo showed her kneeling next to a child, pointing at a diagram with calm eyes. The caption read, Making the Hard Things Small. Ethan clipped that article and kept it on his desk. One evening, as the sun set, Ethan walked into the lab quietly. He saw Zuri helping a little boy who was afraid to plug in a battery. The boy hesitated, worried it might spark. Zuri smiled gently. We'll do it together, she said. She guided his hand until he connected the wire. The motor hummed to life. The boy gasped, then laughed in surprise. Zuri clapped softly. See? You did that. At the same moment, Lena was across the room helping another child with a paper diagram. Ethan realized that the spark wasn't in the machines. It was in the kids' faces when they realized they were capable. He stepped outside into the cool evening air, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in years. His life was full of business deals, meetings, and deadlines. But this was legacy. Not in profits or towers, but in children learning courage one tiny step at a time. Ethan thought back to that first day, standing in the doorway, watching his daughter laugh as her fan spun for the first time. That small laugh had led to all of this. A laugh, a binder, a patient girl with a pencil behind her ear. It had reshaped his heart. He knew the journey wasn't over. The lab would keep growing. More tutors would rise. More kids would learn to breathe, to try, to believe. And he would keep showing up, not to lead, but to listen. As he walked to his car, he whispered the lesson to himself, the same one Zuri had been teaching all along: make the hard thing small. Celebrate the small win. Keep going. And with that, he smiled, knowing their story had only just begun.